care of the farm animals. And Grant himself did enslave a man named William Jones for part of the time that he lived here. Grant holds the strange distinction of being the last president in American history to have been a slaveholder. However, before he left St. Louis, Grant did make the decision to free William Jones. So whatever he may have felt personally about slavery, Grant did learn a lot about these disagreements over slavery while living here at this house.
Was Mr. Jones given or was he purchased?
We're not 100% sure, actually. We know that Grant obtained him from his father-in-law, but whether it was a gift or a transaction.
It was like a gift. He can't afford it.
Yeah, well, we're not 100% sure. You know,
he could afford a guy.
He could have taken a loan, possibly, but it's hard to say with.
And maybe $250.
Yeah, could have been. Yeah, it's a good thought. So we're not 100% sure.
Yeah.
But in any case, for the enslaved laborers here at Whitehaven, during the American Civil War, you know, they'd been here from the very beginning, and enslaved labor most likely constructed this house. But during the war, amid the chaos of the conflict here in Missouri, the enslaved people decided to take matters into their own hands. They did end up running away from Whitehaven during the Civil War to try to find a better life and freedom somewhere else. Now, Grant, as you've alluded to, yeah, it was a struggle financially for him here. Grant was raising fruits and vegetables, corn, wheat, potatoes, and apples, but he's running into a lot of problems here. Among other things, poor weather conditions, health issues. Grant suffered from malaria through most of his life, so migraines and fevers keep him stuck in bed. And the economy is very weak in the late 1850s, and so Grant's not making enough money to support his growing family. So the Grants lived at this house for 5 years. They were here until 1859. The Grants relocated to Illinois, to a town called Galena in the northwestern part of the state, but they were only there for about a year when the American Civil War broke out. So you all probably know the next steps from there as Grant unexpectedly rises to become the nation's top general and orchestrates a campaign to defeat the Confederacy, which in turn will later elevate Grant to become president of the United States. But for our purposes today, worth keeping in mind that right before the Civil War, Ulysses S. Grant was a struggling farmer dealing with hardship, poverty, an uncertain future, and only 10 years after he left this house, he's president of the United States. So Whitehaven to the White House in 10 years. Not a bad turn of events, to say the least. So the Grants never lived at this house again after the war, but they did acquire it from the Dent family. The Grants went on to own Whitehaven for almost 20 years from the end of the Civil War until Ulysses' death in 1885. So the Grants do come back and vacation periodically, and President Grant will raise his horses here. So the Parks Museum, that red building on the right, that was actually constructed 150 years ago based on President Grant's designs, and he would have had 20 to 25 horses at a time inside that stable. So for Ulysses S. Grant, the Whitehaven estate is his wife Julia's childhood home. It's where the two of them met as a young couple, and the Grants raised 4 children at this house in the 1850s, right before the Civil War. So despite their financial struggles, a lot of great memories together as a family here at Whitehaven for the Grants. So that's about all I really have for the introduction. What questions do we have as we get ready to make our way up to the house?
Is this the original paint scheme?
Fair question. The house was originally painted a cream beige color, and that was the color when the Grants lived here in the 1850s, but during the Grant family's ownership, it was repainted Paris green in 1874. And so the Paris green color is very expensive, very reflective of the Victorian era, and the Park Service went with this color because the Grants chose it. Definitely a conversation starter for sure. The original paint had arsenic in it, and thankfully we get the paint from Sherwin-Williams today free of arsenic, thankfully.
So how did the Park Service acquire it?
Sure. The house was in private ownership until 1986, so another 100 years after Grant had died, it was still privately owned, but thankfully a group of local citizens here in the area, they were concerned about the future of the home, and they orchestrated they worked with the local government here in St. Louis, and they acquired the house. and it was then transferred to the Park Service in 1989. So a little over 30 years since the Park Service is.
Anheuser-Busch people?
I'm sorry?
The Anheuser-Busch people?
The Anheuser-Busch folks, they only own the property across the street. They got about 300 acres over there, but the Busch family had no association or ownership of Whitehaven.
So that 100 years of private ownership was not descendants of Grant.
That's correct. Yeah, Grant, he lost ownership towards the end of his life because he got wrapped up in a Wall Street market swindle, and it left the family hands at that point. So just 6 different owners, all people not related to the Grants.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I thank you for your interest, and we'll go ahead and make our way up. And I will pass along some safety precautions as we walk up here as well. The room to the far left of the house, that's the sitting room. There's one large step getting in and out of that room. People do sometimes miss that step, so just kind of watch out for that as you're walking through. The top floor upstairs, unfortunately, we don't have access, but it's because we have the same stairway General Grant used to go upstairs. So a little too unsafe to use that stairway today, but there's part of the basement that's open later on. And finally, inside the dining room, just to the left of the front door, it looks like there's a mirror above the fireplace in that room, but it is a TV screen. So it's not General Grant's TV, but we got a 2-minute video recreating a conversation between Grant and his father. So turn that on at any time, but other than that, you will see me in the back of the house. You're done going through?
So most of this is original.
The structure itself is still 60% original. So fireplaces, the pine wood floors, this is an exact reproduction of the original floor underneath us. So we still have the original flooring. You see a lot of wavy glass panels with air bubbles in them. Those are original to the house as well. And of course the aforementioned stairway right here is the same one Grant would have used. And that's original to the house here as well. So a lot of the structure, unfortunately no furniture. When Grant was president, they put their furniture in storage, and the house they had it stored in, destroyed by fire. Yeah, so that unfortunately is not a luxury we have here.
That's the
Okay, you're
code.
welcome.
That's the code at all.
The chair rail, and also even the door, the front door. Did you notice?
What specifically?
It's pretty low too.
Yeah.
Julius, have you heard from your sister yet about her visit?
No, Julie, I've not heard from her yet.
Well, there's room for her here, but not for that abolitionist father of yours.
Papa, don't be rude. Well, it would be nice to see her before the end of the wheat harvest.
Although if she comes at harvest time, she'll see how much we rely on slaves, and I'll be sure to hear from father about that.
Ulysses, your father has no right to pass judgment on us. Why, we treat our slaves like family.
Papa, don't.
some more rooms in the back. I was hanging out in the office space here. This particular room had to be reconstructed because last owners of this house turned it into a sunroom. So they had to rebuild it back to the office. But the advantage is that there's central heating and air in this room.
Yeah, it definitely.
Yes. And then right behind you too, there's a map of the property. This is showing the boundaries of Whitehaven when Grant owned it back in the, it was about 1878, but we're standing right here on the map and kind of this J-shaped property. That was the entirety of the Whitehaven estate. And by the time Grant was president, there was a railroad line that was put through the property. And in return for constructing that railroad, the company also built a train station. So there was Grant Station here at Whitehaven. So kind of joke with visitors sometimes, this is sort of the Amazon Prime of Grant State. Get stuff from Washington, D.C. shipped right here to the train station at Whitehaven.
It's an interesting.
Where was that at?
This was,
From where we are now?
yeah, so we probably pretty close to, so we got our parking lot, and just beyond our parking lot, kind of where Grant Road is today, that's where the train.
Oh, where the bike path is now.
Yeah, so it would have, it's kind of sort of in between what is Grant's Farm today across the street, owned by Anheuser-Busch and us, so right along the road.
Very close to the house, they would have definitely heard all of the noise of that.
Definitely.
When did you say that was built?
The railroad was installed about 1871 in the train station, and this map is from 1878, a few years later. So, and the Jefferson Barracks, where Grant was stationed, there's a little corner of it down here that kind of just gives you an idea of where he would have been, how he would have gotten here to Whitehaven back in the day.
Would that be for coal? It's so small.
That's correct. Yeah, that's a coal burning stove. So in the winter time, you'd put your coals in there just to keep the room warm, and it would be removable, so you could take it out in the summertime. But yeah, a coal burning stove. Then in the other parts of the back here, we have two kitchens where the enslaved laborers cooked. In the summertime, they cooked out in the stone building. The main purpose behind that is keep the heat away from the home, although you can imagine it would not be very comfortable for the enslaved themselves. And there was also a laundry room, which is the door on the left. However, in the winter time, the enslaved cooked in the basement, and they would do that because on a cold day like today, you'd warm up the rest of the house by cooking in the basement. So there are a couple exhibits in another video downstairs about the enslaved, but that is open for public access. And two red buildings, there is an ice house on the left for food preservation and a chicken house on the right, a big 2-story chicken house, usually 40 or 50 chickens at a time. So please feel free to keep exploring at your own pace. I'll be roving around answering more questions.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Carefully, so there's no railing.
Here, thank you.
So this thing,
The wall here, yeah, this can actually, it's movable. So God forbid if there was a tornado or a storm of some sort, you could put this down and it acts as a storm shelter.
Degrees out for